Husband didn't know I was in the room when he cheated on me. So next day I serve him divorce papers. My husband's laughter filled the house, a sound I once cherished, now slicing through me like a blade. I stood frozen in the doorway of our living room, my keys dangling silently in my hand. As I watched him kiss her, he didn't know I was there. And that ignorance was the final crack in the foundation of our marriage. It was supposed to be an ordinary Thursday. I'd come home early from the office, my arms laden with groceries for the dinner I'd planned to surprise David with. 10 years of marriage, 3 miscarriages, and countless late-night talks about our future had led me to believe we were unbreakable. But there, in the amber glow of our living room, David's hands were tangled in the hair of a woman I didn't know, their lips locked in a fervor that belonged to the early days of our love, not this stranger. My heart didn't race. It stopped, as if refusing to beat in a world where this could be real. I don't know how long I stood there, invisible in my own home. The groceries slipped from my hands, the soft thud of apples hitting the floor unnoticed by the two of them. She giggled, a sound like tinkling glass, and whispered something in his ear. He grinned, the same grin he'd given me when we danced at our wedding, when we painted our first apartment, when we cried together after the last doctor's visit. That grin wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to her. I could have screamed. I could have stormed in, ripped them apart, demanded answers. But I didn't. My feet carried me backward, silent as a ghost, until I was outside again, the cold night air slapping my face. I drove to a hotel, checked in under my maiden name, and sat on the edge of a stiff mattress, staring at the divorce papers I'd drafted in my mind 1,000 times, but never thought I'd need. By morning, they were real, printed at a 24-hour copy shop, each word a shard of my shattered trust. David was sipping coffee at the kitchen island when I returned home. The woman was gone, the living room pristine, as if nothing had happened. He looked up, surprised, and smiled. "Hey, babe, you're up early. Where'd you go last night?" His voice was warm, casual, a perfect mask. I wanted to believe it, to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen, but the image was seared into me. I slid the papers across the counter, my hands steady despite the storm inside. "What's this?" he asked, his brow furrowing as he scanned the document. His face drained of color, the coffee mug trembling in his grip. "Clara, what the hell?" "I was here last night," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through his confusion. "I saw you. With her." His mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. For the first time in years, David had no charming comeback, no easy smile to smooth things over. "Clara, I can explain." "Don't," I interrupted. "There's nothing you can say that changes what I saw, what I felt." My voice cracked, betraying the tears I'd sworn not to shed. 10 years. David. 10 years. And you threw it away in our own home. He stood reaching for me, but I stepped back. His touch, once my anchor, now felt like poison. "It was a mistake," he stammered. "It didn't mean anything. She's nobody. Clara. I swear." "Nobody," I laughed, a bitter sound that startled even me. "Nobody doesn't get invited into our house. Nobody doesn't get to take what was ours." I pointed to the papers. "Sign them. I'm done." The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, phone calls, and packing boxes. David tried to fight it, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to angry. But I didn't listen. I couldn't. Each message was a reminder of the lie I'd lived in, the love I'd poured into a man who'd stopped loving me back. I moved into a small apartment across town, its bare walls a stark contrast to the home we'd built together. Friends called, offering sympathy or gossip, but I kept them at a distance. This pain was mine to carry, at least for now. One evening, as I unpacked a box of old photos, I found a picture from our honeymoon in Greece. David and I were laughing on a sunlit beach, our arms wrapped around each other, the sea sparkling behind us. I traced his face with my finger, wondering where that man had gone. Had he ever really existed, or had I built him up in my mind? ignoring the cracks that must have been there all along. The divorce hearing came faster than I expected. David showed up in a suit, his eyes red-rimmed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He didn't contest the terms, didn't fight for the house or the savings. He just sat there, staring at me across the courtroom, as if searching for the woman who used to forgive his flaws. I didn't look away, but I didn't feel triumph either, just emptiness. Afterward, he caught me in the hallway. "Clara, I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I ruined everything. I got lost. I don't know how it happened. I wanted to hate him, to scream that his apologies were too late, but all I felt was pity." "You didn't just lose yourself, David," I said. "You lost us." I walked away, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Each step a declaration of my freedom. Months passed, and I started rebuilding. I took up painting again, something I'd abandoned after our first miscarriage. The canvases filled my apartment with color, each stroke a piece of myself reclaimed. I joined a book club, made new friends, and even went on a few dates, though my heart wasn't ready for more. The pain lingered, but it no longer defined me. One night, I got a letter from David. Not an email, not a text, but a handwritten note, the kind we used to leave each other on the fridge. It was short, just a page, but it shook me. He wrote about his regret, his therapy, his realization of how much he'd taken for granted. He didn't ask for forgiveness or a second chance, just for me to know he was trying to be better. I read it 3 times, then tucked it away in a drawer. Maybe one day I'd respond, but not yet. The woman from that night, I learned later, was a co-worker of his, someone who'd been chasing him for months. She'd moved on to someone else, leaving David to face the wreckage alone. Part of me felt a flicker of vindication, but it was fleeting. Her role in our story was a symptom, not the cause. The real betrayal was David's choice, and that was his burden to carry. As I stood in my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized something. The woman I was before that night, the one who trusted blindly, who loved without question, was gone. But the woman I was becoming was stronger, wiser, unafraid to demand what she deserved. I didn't need David to complete me. I never had. The love I'd given him was real, but so was my worth, and I wouldn't let his mistakes define it. Life moved forward, as it always does. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, sharing my story with others who'd faced betrayal or loss. Their resilience inspired me, and I found purpose in helping them find theirs. One evening, as I shared a cup of tea with a woman whose husband had left her for someone else, she asked me how I'd survived. I smiled, thinking of the divorce papers, the tears, the nights spent rebuilding my heart. "You survive by choosing yourself," I said, "even when it hurts, especially when it hurts." Now, as I write this, I'm sitting in my apartment, a canvas drying in the corner, a book open on my lap. The pain hasn't vanished, but it's quieter now, a soft ache instead of a scream. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm ready for it. David's betrayal was a wound, but it was also a wake-up call, a reminder that I am enough. What do you think? Was I right to walk away? Or should I have given him a chance to explain? Share your thoughts. I'm curious to hear where you stand. Attorney Atin.